Hello. So yes, it is 9 o'clock on a Friday night, and I'm still in my scrubs. Don't judge me. I got home from work a little late and just have not changed yet because got home, ate dinner, and jumped right into reading up on this study and trying to break it down so that I could explain it to you all. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, there is a research study that is like kind of circulating right now. The link to it is, and the title of the research study is Geranium and Lemon Essential Oils and their active compounds downregulate angiotensin converting enzyme 2, ACE2, which is a SARS-CoV-2 spike receptor binding domain in epithelial cells. Isn't that a mouthful? But the article comes from the journal Plants, and let's see, it was published in 2020. And the authors are Kumar et al. It's a group of researchers from Taiwan, actually. But so I shared the link earlier today to this on my personal Facebook page, and got a lot of questions about it. So I thought I would just hop on here and explain it, because this is going to be easier than trying to type out a post to explain it. But let me go ahead and start with a disclaimer that, one, I am not a physician. I am a medical professional, but I'm not a doctor. I don't play them on TV. I am a medical professional. I do have some experience with research. I have been a chief investigator in a study, and have been involved with several research studies. I have learned that I enjoy reading and breaking down research, and reading up on research much more than I enjoy actually like participating as far as doing the research. I don't like the grunt work because it's hard sometimes. But I enjoy what research can give us as far as knowledge, information on topics. But I am not claiming here to prevent, cure, or treat any diseases. So also, anytime you're thinking about changing up what you're doing for your health, before stopping or starting any new medications, always talk with your healthcare provider. So that's my disclaimer. So if you are on here with me and you are watching the replay, let me know that so that I know if you're watching the replay. And if you have questions while I'm on here, go ahead and ask them and I'll try to answer them. Or if I don't get them, I probably won't answer them tonight actually, but go ahead and drop your questions in the comments and I'll come back and answer them at another time. So basically what I wanted to say about this article is what this article does not say. This article does not say that lemon essential oil or geranium essential oil will prevent, treat, or cure COVID-19 infections. Okay, even though it does mention, the SARS-CoV-2 spike receptor, it mentions the virus that can cause COVID-19. It mentions that in the title, but this article does not claim, or it does not advise using lemon essential oil or geranium essential oil to prevent or treat or cure COVID-19. Okay, that is not what it says. But there is a lot of good stuff and helpful stuff that it does say. Oops, sorry. Live video. So basically in this study, what they did was they took several essential oils. They actually looked at 30 different essential oils, and they excuse me, checked them for cytotoxic effects, which means like cell killing, cytotoxic effects, and their effect on inhibiting ACE2 receptors. Okay, so what ACE2 is, and I'm looking at the study here. I wrote some notes down so I don't have this all just like stored right up in here. So bear with me. So what ACE2 is, ACE stands for angiotensin converting enzyme 2. So angiotensin converting enzyme 2, ACE2, is a protein on the surface of many different cell types in the body. You can find it on the cell surfaces of lung tissue, heart tissue, blood vessels, kidney, liver, and the GI tract. Also in epithelial cells, which line certain tissues like the lining of the nose, mouth, and lungs. And angiotensin converting enzyme 2, ACE2, is an enzyme that generates small proteins from the breakdown of angiotensin. That's where it gets its name from, angiotensin converting enzyme. So these small proteins that are produced by that breakdown regulate functions in the cell. So ACE2 is very, very important in regulating certain processes like blood pressure, wound healing, and inflammation. There is some evidence that suggests that ACE2 may be higher in patients with hypertension, diabetes, and coronary heart disease. Why does this matter when it comes to COVID? Well, last year there was some research, I believe it was done last year, but it may have been late 2019, but there was some research that was completed by, let me find it, it's on here. Let's see. Last year, recent studies, it says, have revealed that the COVID-19 spike protein, you may have heard about that on the news, it has a strong affinity with ACE2 on host cells. Viruses cannot replicate on their own. Viruses have to have a host cell to replicate, to make copies of itself so that it can spread. And to gain entry into the cells, they have to have some way to get in. And usually it's a receptor on the cell. So ACE is a type of, or ACE has receptors on the cell that let the ACE in to the cell to do what it does. Or it connects and creates a response, which is the breakdown of ACE. So the way that this works is it helps me to think of receptors kind of like a lock and a key on cell membranes. So if the key fits into that little lock that's sticking up from the cell membranes are covered with so many different receptors, not just ACE receptors, so many. But if that key fits in that receptor, it unlocks it or opens the receptor and causes a response in the cell. So it might be that things come into the cell. It might be that the cell lets things out. It might be that there's like a chain reaction inside the cell because of the presence of that key in the lock, in that receptor lock, but it causes some kind of a response in the cell. So ACE2 receptors are what the COVID-19 spike protein are attracted to and are believed to find entry into our cells with. And that means that whenever a COVID-19 virus is in, when it's coming into contact with the cell, it goes to that ACE2 receptor, from what we understand, and it binds with it. So it fits that lock and key. There are some other things that play into it, but basically it can fit into that lock. And it's a close enough fit that it kind of switches the lock open and it gets entry into the cell. Okay. And then once the virus gets entry into the cell, or the DNA, the RNA, one of those two, I'm not a virologist, so no hate here for that. But basically, the virus then gains entry into the cell and then takes over the cell to start replicating itself. Okay. So the researchers looked at how these essential oils, how they impact the ACE2 receptor activity. And it also looked at the TMPRSS2 activity. And I had to Google that one because I did not know what it is. But that is an enzyme that all those letters number 2. It's an enzyme that may help certain viruses gain entry into cells. So, like I said, the spike protein may not fit the ACE2 receptor exactly, but apparently this TM, other letters too, it can help the spike protein on COVID-19 virus. It can help it to bind and fit that lock so it can open the lock like a key. So, clear as mud. I'm trying to make this understandable. I hope I am. So, anyway, when it comes to essential oils, the researchers did discuss that there are a wide range of essential oils and their components that have been clinically proven to possess antiviral properties. If you are curious about learning more about this, I encourage you to if you just want to kind of crack open that Pandora box, everyone, if you have a web browser, you can access PubMed, and that's actually where I found this article. PubMed, it's PubMed, PubMed.gov. It is a government database for research studies. So when research studies are done and published, like legitimate research studies, when they are published, they go into the PubMed database, and you can search it for free and look up articles. So you may not be able to actually access the entire article. Sometimes articles are free, and sometimes you have to pay for access to the journal. But you can at least see the title of the articles, and most of the time you can get an abstract, which an abstract is like the summary of the article. So go to pubmed.gov, and you can search essential oil or essential oils and whatever other topic you want to know about. So you can search, essential oils and antiviral if you want to know about the essential oils that have been studied for their antiviral properties. So sorry for that little rabbit trail. All right, back on track. So the researchers, what they did was they looked at how 30 essential oils affected this line of cells that they used for their test cells. So this was an in vitro study, which means it was not done inside of a living organism. They took a line of sample cells, and they were sample cells. This is really important, or at least it was to me. They used a line of cell tissue, a cell line called HT29, and it is a colon adenocarcinoma cell line, so colon cancer cell line. That is because the ACE2 overexpression, like there's an abundance of ACE2 expression, which is frequently observed in GI tissue and colon cell lines. So that's why they use this, because they said, okay, if we want to see if this has activity, we need to get some cell tissue that has a lot of ACE activity, and we need to see what these oils have an effect on when it comes to that. So when they were looking at the cytotoxicity, that's the, cell toxicity of these essential oils, you have to remember that they were testing it on colon adenocarcinoma cells. So they were testing it on colon cancer cells, and they put them in a medium, I think it said like a petri dish probably, but these were not tested, again, in living organisms. So that's important to note. But out of those 30 oils, they found that there were 15 oils that were not cytotoxic at reasonable levels, reasonable doses. And so those were the 15 that they used, because they didn't want their study to kill off the cells, because then they wouldn't be able to study the activity. Does that make sense? So they found out which ones they could find a reasonable toxicity level with. They dosed it down so that it wouldn't kill those cells, and then they studied the ACE effects on those cells with those oils. And all 30 of the oils that they tested, and then they found 15, like I said, that passed their cytotoxicity measure. All of those oils, though, all 30 are GRAS, and that it means generally regarded as safe for human consumption by the FDA. So they tested entirely, all the oils that they tested are considered safe by the FDA for human consumption. So that's good to note too. And out of those, they, like I said, they identified 15 out of those 30 to test for the ACE activity. And then they applied them, and they go into detail, in this, but they applied basically the essential oils in different strengths to these petri dishes, basically, with these adenocarcinoma cell lines. And then they had controls that they didn't do anything to, so they just had the adenocarcinoma cells. And then they had the ones that they tested all these essential oils on. And then they measured the ACE2 concentration and the ACE2 activity. So they measured how many ACE receptors there were. And then they checked the activity, like how much it changed. And what they found was that it looked like almost all of the oils had some degree of effect on the ACE activity, but they found that geranium essential oil and lemon essential oil in particular had the strongest effect on downregulating the ACE2 activity. So what that means is, if you can imagine all these ACE2 receptors being like, hey, and creating if you can imagine them as waving hands, trying to catch something, This is what I'm picturing. So when the essential oils, when they applied it and it downregulated, it was kind of like it closed those down. So they found that geranium and lemon essential oils downregulated that ACE2 expression the most. It downregulated it in, I'll look at the chart here. In geranium, let's see, it downregulated it to where it only had 10% of the activity of the control, meaning the cells that they didn't do anything to. So, you know, if the controls were at 100%, geranium had 10% activity. So that's pretty significant. And then when it came to lemon essential oil, it regulated the activity down to almost 25%. So 1/4 of what it was before. What now does all this mean? Oh, you remember that other enzyme too, the TM letters 2 enzyme? They also saw that geranium and lemon essential oil were effective at reducing that activity too, the most out of any of the other oils that they tested. So somehow, they don't know exactly how, but somehow those essential oils kind of close down the ACE2 receptor activity. And what that means when it comes to COVID is that means that if they can downregulate the ACE2 receptor activity, it's like you have less receptors for the virus to possibly attach to and enter the cell and then replicate. So again, it doesn't mean that these oils will necessarily prevent infection, but it may reduce the risk of infection. And the authors got into that in the discussion. So if you ever are looking at a research study, you know, some of the best places, if you're not familiar with research and all the terminology, abstracts are good to read, introductions are really good to read usually, and then conclusions and discussion are really good. So basically, this was the author's conclusion. So ACE2 is a receptor and host cells favoring virus cell entry, and it was recognized as one of the prime targets to minimize the infection of COVID-19. In this study, we presented the first piece of evidence, so this is the first time this has been studied in 2020, this article. First piece of evidence that geranium and lemon essential oils and their major compounds, so they also broke down the compounds to see which ones seem to have the most activity. So lemon essential oil, geranium essential oil, and their major compounds could downregulate, reduce ACE2 expression in epithelial cells. Epithelial cells, remember, those are the cells that line the membranes of your nose, mouth, and lungs. So they could reduce the expression in those cells, thereby blocking virus entry into host cells, the author's words, and eventually preventing viral infection, the author's words. However, this is very important to note, however, further studies are highly warranted to unveil the underlying molecular mechanisms of this effect. So they're saying that basically they don't understand how it works, they just noticed that it did. Okay, so I hope that helped to break that down for you. So am I saying to, you know, start dosing up on your geranium and your lemon essential oil? Not necessarily, but it's very interesting. And will I start maybe, you know, applying these before I go into work in the mornings? There's a good possibility of that. I mean, you know, they smell good for one. But if they could maybe help my cells to have a stronger protection response when it comes to, you know, this virus floating around, then why not? And one of the key points when it comes to why look into essential oils, something that the authors mentioned, is that, you know, it can take a long time to develop and research and investigate the how effective new medications are and how safe they are. But when it comes to essential oils, especially those that are generally regarded as safe, especially if you do them in moderate amounts, you know, don't drink a whole bottle of geranium oil, okay? One, it'll taste bad. But two, that's way too much, because when it comes especially to our essential oils from Young Living, they are super, super, super potent. One drop goes a long way. Covers a lot of cells in your body many times over. And the same with lemon oil. So these are really potent. You don't need that much. So if you use them in small amounts, moderate amounts, then they are relatively harmless. Like, you know, what does it hurt to try, basically, especially when in comparison to what some of the alternatives may be. So I hope that that was helpful for you all. If you found it helpful, let me know. I also today, during my lunch break, whenever I was looking up and finding this article so that I could print it later, I found some other research articles that were pretty interesting and that have been published since this one. So they were published after it. So if that is something you might be interested in me breaking down too, those studies mention other essential oils and how they may be promising when it comes to regulation or reduction of potential, you know, infection or treatments. Trying to choose my words carefully so that this doesn't get flagged by anyone. But if you're interested in that, let me know, because I do love research. I love digging into it. I love breaking it down, and I like helping to make it understandable. So I really hope that I did that. Let me know if I did or if I didn't, please. But if that is something that you'd be interested in hearing more about, maybe we can do a little series, and I would be happy to do that, because I've already printed off those articles tonight and have not read them yet, but they looked really promising, and there are so many more out there, I do believe, and so many more coming. So if you do not have these oils yet and you want help in getting them, reach out to me, because one, they just smell lovely. I've got them in my diffuser behind me, and they're super easy to order. And what I may do too is I may drop some pictures and some instructions on my personal page for you to do that. And so if and when I do that, I'll drop the link here in the comments or possibly in the title of the post. So just be watching for that. But I hope y'all have a great night. I'm going to hop off here and get ready for bed because I have to go back and work in the morning. So thank you so much for being on here with me. Love you all, and pray that you make smart choices and stay healthy and happy. Bye.